The draft for the Vietnam War was a big fucking deal in 1968 when I was drafted and went to get my physical. They were drafting 300,000 young boys a year to go to Vietnam. We had over 1 million soldiers there, I think, at the time, something like that. And so for months, I had been mailed a draft card. You had to carry it. It says on it, it's the law. You have to carry this on your body at all times. We were doing anything we could to get out of everybody knew that war was bullshit, especially if you were 20 years old. I would turn 20 in 1968, and I was no longer in high school, and I hadn't enrolled in college. I didn't have the grades. So I was looking at any option, and I literally for months and months, I carried this card and the date was on it or I got it in the mail of when I had to be there for my physical. And this was a once a year deal, the physical, with everyone from South Texas in my age group that was not in school or didn't have a medical, waiver issue. You met there on that day to get a 10-hour-long physical with 500 other guys, and so that's a whole story, and that's kind of why I'm doing this, is to tell that story. Fred called me about a movie that I recommended to him called Across the Universe, and it's a musical with Beatles songs, and it's about those days, and the scene in that about how it was for those of us being drafted is so dead on, it's scary, and I've never seen anything like it. But so leading up to this, that whole year, I'm freaking out, and I'm seeing how every night on the evening news was a head count. It was like a football score tally with how many of them were killed. 100,000 by then, 200,000, 300,000. How many Americans had been killed? How many Americans have been in a bar graph? Every night you saw the tally of how many of them we killed and how many of us and killed and wounded. Every night we were freaking out, and we knew it was a bogus war. It had nothing to do with if it would have been World War II against our country was at stake, I would go in a heartbeat, and I would encourage my kid to go. But for Vietnam, we knew it was bullshit. So we're trying to do anything we can to get out. I knew people that went to Canada, and I strongly considered that. I knew people who went to Mexico, strongly considered that. You would see every night on the news about somebody blew his toe off to get out of the draft, and I remember looking at my body more than once going, which digit could I live without? And in the end, I had no other option, except just to go. So I decided I was going to tell them I was a dope addict and a junkie, and I wasn't. I'd never done anything like that. I'd done LSD and pot, weed, but I'd never injected anything. And so I got a friend who knew a place over off of Sprucewood, I believe, and Sunset, which Gail and I would live there 20 years later, and not there, but in that neighborhood, on that street. That it was a shooting gallery, and it was not abandoned, but nobody owned it, and it was sort of burnt out and no furniture, and it was where all the junkies hung out. And so I went over there, and they were all lined up, all these dudes. I'm pretty sure they were all white guys, and they were shooting up, squatting down in the hall, lined up in a row, and in every room, on no furniture, all around the walls of every room, shooting up. That's where I remember it. And I would go there that was in the very end when I was getting really desperate to get out. The date was coming close. It was like July. gonna be, or June, it was gonna be that I had to show up. And but I would never do it. I just was fascinated by watching it. You know, it scared the crap out of me, man. Almost terrified. But I went 2 or 3 times, and finally, I think the night before, a guy told me, take an eraser from a pencil, on a pencil, and rub the 3 veins on each of your arms hard till they bruise. And I did that for about a week, 3 different ones with 3 different tracks, so I could tell them I was a junkie, but I wouldn't let them do me. And I think the last minute, I let them actually put a needle in, but nothing in it. And what they did is they would draw the blood into the syringe and then shoot it back in. So no heroin or any other injectable drug. But turns out later, 2 weeks, 3 weeks later, I had hepatitis, the worst black hepatitis you can get, a deadly form of it. And I got it that night because 2 weeks later I had hepatitis. I was sick as a fucking dog and yellow as shit. A friend of mine was in the hospital at the same time. We talked every day, and he told me what they were doing for him, and I took vitamin C and drank juices, but it was horrible. And so the night before, I think I let him do that, and then the next day, before the day actually came, my drive card is a funny story. I carried that thing in my wallet for months and months and months, and I remember we went to the drive-in, a bunch of dudes, 3 or 4 guys, 5 guys, and we're smoking weed, and I think we had a quart of beer maybe or something, but we were smoking weed, and we ran out of papers. We didn't have no more. We had plenty of weed and no papers, and we're looking at paper bags and whatever else. I went, you know what? And this is a true story on my life. This is a true story. I took my drive card out and I peeled it and it came off in 2 complete sheets. And we'd seen people burning their draft cards in other places, not in South. No one in South Texas burned their draft card at any kind of war protest. You'd get killed. This place was a fucking redneck armed camp, and they'll kick your fucking ass if you burn a draft card. So I'd seen people do that, and I thought, I want to do that, but I didn't have it. There was no opportunity. But I peeled my card in half and rolled 2 joints on my life. That's a true story. And smoked my draft card. I love that story, and it's true on my life. I keep saying that, but people, you think you're exaggerating. So the day comes, draft day, or not draft, but the physical comes, day for the physical, and you had to be at this building south of the courthouse on Flores, on the west side of the street. I'll never forget it. It was a block long brick 2-story old, like an office, because it had 2 floors, but it was a block long, and it was completely empty. You could tell it had been emptied, and they filled it up with little stations all throughout it. Both floors were 100 different stations, medical stations, for the draftees to go to and get their ears and everything checked. And so I remember waiting out front for it to open. It'd be either 9, 10 o'clock in the morning, and there's guys lined up down the street. This is from all over South Texas. Once a year, they had a draft. This is way before the lottery or anything like that. This is once a year, and they drafted 300,000 people in 1968. So all of South Texas that was draft age was there, and they were lined up around the building. 300-400 guys, at least. And I remember the gang, just what stood out in my mind is the West Side gang members. But this is a gang of a different time. Wipe your mind of what a gang was. In 1968, a gang were really cool dressed dudes, man, with on their backs, I forget the names of but they'd have them embroidered or the different things in these they're like zoot suits or something, but it seemed to me like they were all, a solid color, and then they'd have the names like the Dukes or the Elegantes or something like that. I seem to remember one that was Consavos. Maybe I'm making that up, but it was just a cool thing. I mean, I just remember watching that day. So we finally go in, and as soon as you get in, you're stripped down to your underwear and maybe socks. I didn't have no socks. So your underwear. And you get in a line and you go to and they sent, like 20 guys the first station, 20 guys the second station, 20 guys third station, 20 guys fourth station, 20 or 50. I don't know how many it was. They were lined up all around that building, a block long, 500 guys. Lined up at stations all day long, poking, prodding, da-da, boba. And at the end of it, and the whole time, I guess at one point they ask you, are you homosexual, are you communist, are you conscientious objector, are you crazy, are you, whatever, to a way out. And I told them, no, I'm a junkie. I said, I'm a heroin addict. And I showed them arms. I said, there are these fake bruises on there. So they go all the way through it. And so at the end of it, 10 hours of this. It was all day long it took. But 10 hours of it. And at the end of it, those of us who had some other issues, like all those things, were told to report. And they gave us a piece of paper. And it was like a week later at a bus depot or something downtown, and we all got on, and we all reported. A week later, all the crazies got on a bus and went to Fort Sam Houston for a psychiatric evaluation, blood tests, everything, whatever you claim, they're going to verify it right there. So on this bus going over to Fort Sam were all these people that are either acting gay or crazy or whatever to get out of the draft. So there's 25, I don't know, maybe 30 guys, maybe more. But some of them were like dressed up like women. It was the craziest thing. You're just cartoonish women, because they're straight. Most of them, there might have been gay guys on there, but most of these guys were straight as shit. And so there's guys kissing. Two guys were kissing and acting gay. I swear I remember one guy at the front. I'm at the front, and he propositions the bus driver, "Hey man, want a blowjob? I'm gay." He was. So we get there, and maybe some of these people were literally crazy. I mean, there was people acting with like what I now know was Tourette's shit. I'd never heard of that. They were all acting insane. So we get there, and they drew my blood the very first thing. All of us, they drew our blood. So I knew they were going to check that and find no drugs in my system, and my story would be blown and I'd be drafted. But I kept up the pretense and sat in front of a psychiatrist. Yeah, I said, I've been a heroin addict since I was 14. I didn't even live in Texas when I was 14. I was born here in San Antonio, but my dad was military. I didn't come here till 1966. I was 18, 17. But I told them that. And so they said, all right, we're going to do the blood test, and if it comes back, I guess they said you're out. I don't know what they said, but I knew the jig would be up in a week or two at the most. And so I was kind of resigned to going, and that's when I probably really considered going to Canada and Mexico, but I didn't have the balls to do any of that. I would have just gone out. I've been another fucking dumbass motherfucker over there in the trenches getting my head blown off for no purpose, no reason. But instead of that happening, about a week after that, I'm going back to this house off of Sprucewood. We live on the south side up by Highlands, and this was over Sunset Boulevard. And I'm driving around with Mug in his green Torpedo 40 49 Plymouth, 6-cylinder. He kept it clean, but it was just an old car. And but anyway, we were driving around, and Frankie Collins pulls up to us. He's on a motorcycle, a Honda 350, 305, I forget. And he's the baddest dude at Highlands High School. Frankie Collins was a legitimate certified badass. He'd been in so many fights. He'd fight with other schools. This guy, but he was our friend. He liked us. And Mug, he pulled up to Mug at the stop sign. He goes, Mug, I need your car. I got a date this afternoon. And we're going. And Mug goes, I know how to drive a motorcycle. And I go, I do. I had driven a motorcycle maybe once, twice in my life, but I knew how to drive them. I was a natural on it. Anyway, so we swap. They take Mug's car. Me and Mug get on the bike. They got their helmets. So I said, let's go over to that place off clear across town. And I'm going down. We're going down Jones Maltzberger Road towards Sunset, going north. And I'm going about 70 miles an hour down this 4-lane street, 2 each way, hauling fucking balls. And we come up on that intersection at Sunset, and there's 2 lanes coming at us, and we're in the second lane going north, and it was just a line of cars, no way to get in there, and a line this way. But there's one guy pulls right in front of me and stops in the intersection, and I'm going 70 miles an hour. I see him a block away, and I hit the brakes, and I'm sliding and sliding and sliding it. Front and back brake, it goes into a slide like this. And I don't know what we had slowed down to, but by the time we hit that car, I know if I left the brake on, we would, I swear to God, time slowed down. I knew this to be true, that if I left it like that, we would go right under that car and die. There's just all that energy. So at the last minute, on my life, I let off both brakes, and the front of the car was here, and the motorcycle popped up and hit, and me and Mug went flying through the air. On my life, ask my sister. From the middle of that intersection, Mug flew in the air and hit the garage door of the house on the corner facing that street. And I flew the same height, but I had got fucked up. I had been destroyed, and I was a lower, and I hit the top of a stop sign, boing, and fell. Had broken my leg, my left ankle, right above the ankle, smashed it. It hit the engine of the motorcycle, hit the bumper of the car, and my leg was right between it and just crushed that bone. And the right bone almost broken on the handlebars. And when I hit the stop sign, I dislocated my shoulder, or when I hit the ground, and so my right arm was dislocated, and I couldn't move 3 limbs, and I only had 1 arm, and I'm freaking out. I've never been in such pain in my whole life. And that lasted for hours and hours, and they finally got me to Baptist, and I'm screaming at them, give me something for the pain. And finally my mom and dad got there. They wouldn't do anything because I was 19. And so they gave me a shot of Demerol, and they said, look, we're going to give you this shot of Demerol, but don't take anything else for pain at 24 hours. Boom, did nothing. I was in shock. I had been in shock since it, and hyperventilating, and I couldn't stop, and I was just for an hour at least. And when they gave me that shot, I came out of that shock, but the pain was just excruciating. And they said, all right, well, we can't treat you. Dutch didn't have insurance, so they took me to Wilford fucking Hall. I had long hair about like it is now. In 1968, I go to Wilford Hall after having been in the worst fucking head-on collision you could ever imagine in your life, and just bent and fucked up and scraped up. My leg was bleeding like shit. It had scraped the bone to the bone on my shin bone, and was bleeding like hell and broke, man, just crushed. And we get to that hospital out there, and they asked me, have you had anything for pain? I said, well, we're going to give you this shot of Demerol. Don't take nothing else for 24 minutes. Didn't do shit, man. I was up all night screaming in pain. They set it about 2 in the morning or midnight, something like that. And it was a horrible leg break. I was in a cast for a year, a long cast 6 months, and a short cast below the knee 6 fucking months. Look it up. People with broke legs don't spend 6 months. And then they had set it wrong. On the bottom of it, they put a rubber stopper that you walk on. Well, they put the stopper real far forward on my foot so that my leg grew back curved, bent. And so I had to wear like a polio brace. I had to buy a shoe at Tom McCann's, a pair of shoes, and take it out to these shops behind Wilford Hall where they make prosthetics and things. And they built me a metal polio leg case, with a metal case with built into the shoe with a leather thing that laced all up the front. I mean, this long. But needless to say, I didn't have to go to Vietnam. I was 4F, marked 4F, meaning, medical disability. And I've had people, I've told this story before, and I've had people go, so did you have a wreck to get out? And I went, if I was going to have a wreck to get out of Vietnam, I wouldn't have been going 70 miles an hour head on into a car. I would have picked some other way. So, no, it had nothing to do with that, with Vietnam. But I was 4F. I never served. So this, if you're looking, this ain't from Vietnam, nothing like that. This is from my dad. I was an Air Force brat, and we lived in Okinawa, which was a red zone, man. In 1964, 63, and 62, we lived in Okinawa, and we were issued these when we got there. We never wore them, but every dependent on the island. I went to an American high school with all Air Force, Navy, and Army kids, and 3,500 kids at this school. We didn't word it, but so I wear it now. Anyhow, that's my story.